Edward DJEREJIAN, many thanks for coming to the World
My
Policy
pleasure,
Conference, Internet TV. You have been ambassador both in Syria and in Israel, so you know the region extraordinarily well. What impact do you think the Arab Spring, or the Arab Awakening, as I think is the new phrase of du jour, is having on the Palestinian-Israeli issue?
My greatest concern is that as long as the Israelis and the Palestinians do not engage in direct negotiations for a two-state solution, in a short period of time, the Palestinian issue is going to become part of the negative narrative of the Arab Spring. Up to date, neither Israel nor the United States have been targeted as the problem in terms of these popular unrest and revolts. But the young Palestinians in all the countries around Palestine and in Palestine have learned something from their young colleagues in Tunisia and Egypt and elsewhere. And my concern is that they are going to lead peaceful protests against Israel, which will also implicate the United States, will just exacerbate the situation in the region that we call is undergoing the Arab Spring. So this is one of my biggest concerns. Therefore, it is imperative for the Israelis and the Palestinians to get to the table.
Now, presumably, the United States could play a role in this. But
absolutely.
The reason I ask that question is that Barack Obama gave his famous speech in Cairo. There was a real impetus towards getting U.S. involvement, pushing things along. George Mitchell was involved, and yet nothing seems to have happened. Bibi Netanyahu basically called President Obama's bluff, and you have stalemate. And it seems to me that this Palestine-Israel issue is always hostage to American domestic politics. How do you break that particular problem?
Political courage and leadership. You're absolutely right. These domestic considerations are major factors in what a president will do and will not do. We've had many failures, but we've also had very important successes where an American president has taken the lead, has demonstrated the political courage to move forward, be it President Nixon and Kissinger after the Yom Kippur War in the mid-70s, and the disengagement agreements that were negotiated, be it Jimmy Carter in 1979 and the historic Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty, be it Bush 41 and James Baker, the Secretary of State, in the breakthrough Madrid conference, the first time the Arabs and the Israelis got to the same table in face-to-face negotiations. Bill Clinton ran out of time, but he tried. But it needs presidential leadership and courage, and it can be done.
Final question, moving slightly away from Syria, which I know was your main concern in some ways. Iran. Israel has made fairly bellicose hints. What do you think should happen, and what do you think will happen vis-a-vis the Iranian quest to get nuclear capability?
Well, I think there are two major factors here. One, what is happening inside of Iran, which is complex, yet there's an opposition movement that has been suppressed, but it's there, and I think they're taking a page out of the Arab Spring. And I would think that there will be some contagion from the Arab Spring into the domestic political dynamics of Iran. This is not the strongest regime in the world. There are many contradictions in the regime in Tehran, and they should be exploited. Therefore, I think to approach the Iranian issue is not militarily. That can always be seen as the very last option, but really a strong international consensus and sanctions regime to do everything possible to stop them from acquiring a nuclear weapon. That, I think, should be the thrust of policy. It has struck me that the former recently retired head of Mossad in Israel, who I know, Meir Dagan, you can't question his dedication to Israel's security. Shortly after retirement, he said, Israeli military action against Iran to try to deter, not stop, defer its nuclear ambitions will lead to a regional war. And I agree with that. It will lead to an asymmetrical regional war. And the unintended consequences of that are unknown, but one can certainly see that in the first instance, the price of oil will skyrocket. And when the global economy is so fragile, this will have a short-term but an immediate impact. So an international consensus, strengthening sanctions, and playing on the vulnerabilities of the regime in Iran, I think, is the higher policy to adopt.
Edward Jerejian, I get your name mixed. Edward Jerejian, many thanks.
My pleasure to be with you, John.